Alright, we're still in Volume 3, Part 2, Story 2. Let me get my trusty bookmark. Okay, Part 2, Story 2, The Talking Donkey. Now, not many people know about this one, but this is one of my favorites. But I'm going to give you a little tidbit that I like about this. There was this guy that was supposed to curse Israel. And he was a magician, let's say that. But anyway, it's more better if I read the story than anything. And you'll get the understanding. But he was supposed to curse Israel, but he didn't. And the reason why is, of course, in the title. So, Part 2, Story 2, The Talking Donkey. From the moment that the children of Israel began to trust the Word of God, as they did when they looked at the serpent on the pole, things began to go better for them. Coming to the edge of the wilderness, they were made happy to see the more fertile land beyond. And here it was that Moses did something different from anything he had ever done before. He told the prince, more than one prince of Israel, to dig a well with their rods or staves. What's the staves? Staffs. Okay. He said dig a well with your stick. Basically, pretty much. Did you ever try to dig a hole in the sand with a round stick? How far down did you go? All the people gathered and watched the princes at work, and everybody was smiling. Just imagine how you would feel if you saw the elders of your church trying to dig a hole with long sticks. Of course, they didn't get anywhere. And then, water came bubbling out of every sand that they tried in vain to move. Okay, so in other words, water came out. Thus God let them see once more that He was able and willing to provide for them, even when they could do but a little for themselves. Well, that's true. At sight of water, the people began to sing, and their song rang like this: Spring up, O well, sing ye unto it. They were happy now. Here was new proof that God was with them, and from their faith came happiness, and from their happiness, their first victory. Moving northward, they asked Sihon, the king of the Amorites, for permission to pass through their land, his country, but he refused. That was in the other story. Even though they promised not to go into his fields or his vineyards, but go along by the king's highway, he came against them with all his soldiers. There was a big battle, and Israel won, sweeping on to take all his cities from the river Arnon, 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 up to the river Jabbok, Jabbok, Jabbok. If you would look at the map on page 106, we ain't there yet, you will see that the river Arnon runs to the Dead Sea, and the river Jabbok into the river Jordan. This will give you an idea how much land the children of Israel took from the Amorites, and how they went up east from the Dead Sea to get to Canaan. Og, O-G, that's what it says, Og, the king of Bashan, was the next to come against Israel. He was a giant, and his people lived in the Rocky Mountains in a Rocky Mountain fortress. But he too was defeated, and all his land taken from him. And then it has a picture of the water springing up at the top of the page. There it is. The water springing up. Okay. But he too was defeated, and all his lands was taken away from him. By the time the rulers of other cities by this time the rulers of other countries began to be afraid of Israel. One of these was Balak, B-A-L-A-C, king of the Moabites. He was so scared that he said to his friend, the Midianites, Midianites, how shall this country, meaning Israel, lick up all that are around us as the ox lick up the grass of the field? In other words, how are they doing this? Then he got a bright idea. If he couldn't fight with Israel, perhaps he could get some sorcerer, magician, or somebody that's really in the evil arts, to curse them and so weaken them that he could drive them out of the land. He thought of a man named Balaam, B-A-L-A-A-M, Balaam, who was supposed to be able to do this sort of thing. But Balaam lived in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, 500 miles away. Was it worth sending so far? Balak thought it was. His country was in deadly peril, and this seemed to be the only way out. So he sent messengers with a large sum of money to persuade Balaam to come. Behold, he said, there is a people come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth. They abide over against me. Come now, therefore, I pray thee, curse me this people, for they are too mighty for me. Balaam listened to what the messengers had said, but refused to go with them. So they went all the way back to the land of Moab without him. When Balak saw that Balaam didn't come with his messengers, he was very upset. Then he chose some of the most important men of his country and sent them back to Balaam. with more money than before, and with promise of great honors if he could come and curse Israel. This time Balaam decided to go. Saddling his donkey, it doesn't say donkey, but saddling his donkey, he went with the princes of Moab. That was not an easy trip. Not only was it a very long journey and a very hot one, but unknown to him, an angel had been sent from heaven to stop him from going to curse Israel. As for the donkey that he was riding, well, he never dreamed that it could see angels and talk. The first Balaam knew something was wrong was when the donkey went right off the trail into a field. This annoyed Balaam, or him, very much, for he made him look foolish in the sight of his two servants and the princes of Moab. Of course, he didn't know that the donkey had seen the angel with the drawn sword in his hand. So he struck the poor animal and forced it back on the path. Some distance further on, the donkey balked again. They were going around a narrow path through a vineyard. There was a wall on either side, and suddenly the donkey shied at something, shied, S-H-I-E-D, at something, and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. Again he was very angry, and struck the donkey with a cruel blow. In other words, he crushed his foot or scratched his foot while they're going through this garden. By and by they came to a very narrow place, perhaps an edge of a precipice. That's what it says, precipice. A weird name, Precipice, precipice, where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left. Here the donkey saw the angel again and fell right down under Balaam. In other words, it sat. This made Balaam, more angrier than ever, and he beat the donkey with a stick. Now, to his astonishment, he heard a voice nobody heard before or since. The donkey was speaking. Of course, it didn't speak English, but maybe Hebrew or Arabic. What his voice sounded like, nobody knows. But I'd like to have heard it, wouldn't you? And then it has two pictures. First one is the servants going to Balaam and paying for him to come, and he says no. And then the second one is at the wall where he crushed his foot. Wouldn't you want to hear a donkey talk or an animal talk? They have some sort of talk that we have that talks to them, but they're your pets and you do it anyway. But okay, but this is something different. What have I done unto thee, said the donkey, that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? Whew. Because thou hast mocked me, said Balaam, angrily at the animal had behaved so badly, so much important people. In other words, it didn't surprise him that the donkey talked. That's what this says to me. I mean, that's just me. And him being a sorcerer or a magician, or he probably, was very sensitive to animals anyway, so he probably did it anyway. And it probably didn't bother him. That's just me. All right, let me get back to the story, because Balaam's talking again. I would, because normally if an animal talks, you would freak out, wouldn't you? Okay, let's get back. There were, I would there were a sword in my hand, for now would I kill thee. In other words, if I had a sword, I would kill you. That's what he told the donkey. Am I not your donkey? It doesn't say donkey, but the donkey asked. Am I not your donkey? Said the poor little beast, upon which you have ridden every day since I was thine unto this day. Was I ever wont to do so unto thee? In other words, I've done everything for you like you asked me to. Nay, Balaam said. Nay, agreed Balaam reluctantly. In other words, he said, you've always done everything. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw what the donkey had seen all along, an angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand. Instantly Balaam fell flat on his face. Oh, the donkey didn't get him, but the angel did. Whew, that freaked me out. So apparently, this is my version. Animals could talk to him anyway. But then the Lord opened his eyes and he saw the angel and he's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna almost pray that you don't die. And what would you supposed to do? Suppose the angel said to him first. He spake about the little donkey, showing how God cares for animals. Wherefore hast thou smitten thine donkey, it doesn't say donkey, these 3 times? He said, I went out to withstand thee. I went out to withstand thee, because thy way is pervious before me. And the donkey, doesn't say donkey, saw me, and he turned from me these 3 times. Unless she had turned from me, surely now also I had slain thee and saved her life. In other words, the donkey turned away and came, kept me from killing you, basically. And Balaam said, I have sinned, said Balaam, offering to go back home at once. But the angel said, go with the men, but only the word that I shall speak unto thee, that thou shalt speak. In other words, go ahead and go, but whatever I say for you to speak, you're going to speak. So Balaam went with the princess to Moab. Overjoyed by his arrival, King Balak asked Balaam to a mountain peak where they both could look down on the camp of Israel. Now curse them for me, he said, but Balaam couldn't do it. Instead, he blessed them. Balak, annoyed, took him to another place, then another, but it was of no use. Balaam couldn't think of a single curse to utter. He just said what the angel told him to say, and it was all blessing. Blessing is he that blesses thee, he said of Israel, and cursed is he that curseth thee. This made Balak very angry, as well it might. I called thee to curse my enemy. He cried, thinking of all that money that he paid Balaam, and of the princes that had sent to fetch him. And behold, thou hast altogether blessed them these 3 times. Flee now to thy place. In other words, you blessed them these 3 times. Go away. Or, well, he didn't. He said it more angrily than that. Balaam fled as fast as his little donkey could carry him. I wondered what the donkey said to him on the way back. Would we all like to know? Then it has 2 pictures. They're kind of connected, but they're 2, the big one. This is Balaam up here with Balak, and that's Israel down at the bottom. And of course, he sent him away. But Balaam, I don't know if this does talk about him, but he does. He's mentioned again, and so is King Balak. They're mentioned again later on, but that's for another time. But it's probably not in this book, but it's in the original book. Okay, that was part 2, story 2. We're going to stop here for a second, and then we'll get everything ready for the next story, and we'll see what happens. It's getting interesting, but I guess I need to probably put a warning on those past 2. We'll have to see.